Yes, thank you. There should be some slides in a second. I can begin by saying I'm a trained theologian, but I worked within philosophical ethics for the past 20 years. So this will be a mixture of stuff. When I first looked into food waste, I thought this is the easiest job an ethicist have ever had, because this is wrong, and I'm done, so I can go home. But then things started to get complicated. I mean, obviously, the easy thing is to say it's wrong. We heard all these numbers, right? That if food waste was a country, it would be the third largest emitter in the world, that we have 800 million people living in hunger, and we all know about the biodiversity crisis, and all these are connected to food production, food consumption, and thereby to food loss and food waste. I tried to listen yesterday, actually, which is rare at a conference sometimes, but I found that there were different kinds of food waste that weren't in the literature. So I found the unavoidable food loss from farm to fork, the food loss we can't do anything about. And then I found the avoidable food waste, especially when I heard people from developing countries talk, how food get lost from farm to fork because of lack of knowledge, technology, infrastructure, economic support. And then there's an avoidable food waste that seems to go from farm to supermarket or restaurants, which is a waste that is made because it makes economic sense, because we build an economy where waste is actually something that creates a surplus for someone. But I will leave these three aside and talk about the avoidable indirect food waste coming from consumers when we live in luxury, living off food that has an unnecessary size of land use, water use, or greenhouse gas emissions. And then there's the avoidable food waste direct at the consumer when we eat what we want, not what is available, and that happens at supermarkets, at restaurants, and in our private homes. So I tried to find some examples of the indirect food waste, and this can obviously be debated because what is necessary. To the right, you'll see a picture of a typical Danish Christmas lunch, something we indulge in from the middle of November to the end of December. Overeating, over-drinking, oversleeping with people we shouldn't be sleeping, or not sleeping, but you get the sense. A clear example of self-obsessed indulgence. And then I found the menu from last night, which was a very wonderful meal, consisting of 3 kinds of ruminant, which is the most climate-damaging food you can eat. And I was wondering, is this an example of overindulgence? But I'll leave you to decide that. And then there's the direct food waste happening at supermarkets, for instance. This is a picture I took 3 years ago when I went dumpster diving with some students as a part of an ethics course. Found 3 containers in one supermarket full of food that had nothing wrong with it besides that it was better to throw it out because they could put new things on the shelves that would lure consumers to buy them. And on the lid of the container, somebody, before we came, had written a small graffiti. If you're not outraged, you're not paying attention. I think that's the most beautiful graffiti I have ever seen. When we want to behave ethically, there's always 4 steps we have to go through, and I put up the references so you can see I stole this from someone. That's the good thing about being an academic. You're allowed to steal as long as you say you did it. But the idea is that you need the ability to see that the situation contains ethical issues. You need the ability to see that you are at least partly responsible. You need the ability and tools to arrive at a conclusion on what to do, and you then need the will and courage to actually do what you figured out was the right thing to do. Step 1, I would say that only a certain subspecies of contractarians and social Darwinists are able to deny that food loss and food waste constitutes an ethical issue. Step 2, I would say that unless one believes that responsibility is a cheese that can be sliced until the individual slice becomes so thin it disappears, it's hard to deny that we who are involved in living in the Western world have a responsibility. And let me tell you a short story to explain this. At the top you see a village. They spend all year gathering food and money to be able to get through the winter. So they now have 10,000 gold coins. And a thief comes in the night and steals all the coins to buy himself a luxury castle. I guess we can agree this is wrong. This is ethically wrong. But imagine that the same village was visited by 10,000 thieves that independently of each other, even though they knew the others were going to do it as well, stole 1 coin each just to get a little more steak. Would we say they have 1/10,000 of the responsibility of the first thief, or could we say they actually carry the full responsibility for participating in this? And I would claim the latter. Step 3, finding solution based on technology, partnership, governance. I'll leave that to you. You are much more experts in that than me. It was very interesting to listen to this yesterday. And then we come to the hard one. Step 4, now we need the will and courage to do what you figured out we should do. And how do we get that? Because it seems to me that there's not only a time barrier, but also an economic barrier to implement many of the suggestions I heard yesterday. Well, we live in a global culture of hype consumerism. We have to admit that. Some of us do it, I admit that, but the rest of us seem to be dreaming about it. And that culture is characterized by greed, self-indulgence, and indifference towards the suffering of others. If you go to Aristotle, you will see that these are classical vices. And to change the current situation regarding the last 2 kinds of food waste that I mentioned, the avoidable indirect food waste and the avoidable food waste, I think we need more than technology and governance. To get the will to implement these, we need to change our understanding of the good, or as Aristotle would say, the flourishing human life. And to find a metaphor for this, I turned to the American poet Gjerris. And now I do know that there has been a history of discussion around sacraments, specifically I think the Eucharist, between the Catholic and the Protestant Church. So this is only figuratively speaking, I would say. But I think his quote, "Every meal is a sacrament," encapsulates what we need to understand. That eating food is always to participate in a community with all of those present and all of those affected by the meal at the same time. And eating food is also to participate in what the American eco-philosopher David Abram has called the modern human community that constitutes the wonder of life on this rock that is covered with a very thin biosphere that we, with our everyday acumen, seem to call ours. And eating food is also, from a religious perspective, as mentioned earlier, to receive our daily bread from the source of life, the universe, and everything. And I think that we really embed these thoughts into our actions and into our minds and into our hearts as virtues that we try to live by. I think that philosophically we will find that we need some new classical virtues and we need some new virtues. We need to develop the virtues of temperance, of compassion, of awe of nature and respect for nature. And from a religious point, we need to actually believe in the ethics of creation, to believe that the relationship to God is not only decided between God and humans, but that the relationship to God is decided through our relation to creation, both to other humans, but also to the more than human community that we're a part of. Thank you.